Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Talking Politics here at The Hindu with me, Nistula Hebbar, where we unpack the news grabbing the headlines in domestic politics all of last week. The big news of last week was the offer of talks by the union government to put mainstream political parties of Jammu and Kashmir to discuss the delimitation process for assembly seats in the union territory and kickstarting political activity, which has been in a state of limbo ever since August 2019, when the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganisation Act was passed by Parliament. The Act basically divided the former state of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories: Jammu and Kashmir, which was to have an assembly, and Ladakh, which wasn't to have an assembly. Among the leaders who have received calls from the union government as invitations to participate in the talks in Delhi on June 24th are Mehbooba Mufti of the People's Democratic Party, Farooq and Omar Abdullah of the National Conference, Ghulam Nabi Azad of the Indian National Congress, M.Y. Tarigami of the CPM, Ravinder Raina and Nirmal Singh of the BJP, and Altaf Bukhari of the J&K Apni Party, along with Sajjad Lone and Muzaffar Beg of the People's Conference. The offer for talks, ostensibly to discuss the delimitation process for assembly and parliamentary seats in Jammu and Kashmir, which is to presage any assembly polls there, appears extraordinary, considering that many of the leaders who will be sitting across the table with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on June 24th had been incarcerated by his government after the passage of the J&K Reorganisation Act in Parliament. Many of these leaders have also formed what is termed the Gupkar Alliance on August 4th, 2019 at the Gupkar Road residence of Farooq Abdullah in Srinagar, when it became clear that the government was intent on reading down Article 370. The alliance consisted of the National Conference, the PDP, the People's Conference, the Congress Party, the CPM, and the Awami National Conference. The alliance passed a declaration that stated that it was completely opposed to the reading down of Article 370, the splitting of the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. It sought the restoration of statehood, and above all, that nothing should be done without the consent and approval of those who are most concerned with whatever was happening in Jammu and Kashmir. Between August 2019 and the current date, much has happened. Many of these Gupkar Alliance leaders were arrested right after the Parliament passed the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganisation Act of 2019. They were kept as political prisoners and very gradually released in a very staggered manner. There were BDC polls, that's the Block Development Council polls, and for the first time in Jammu and Kashmir, the District Development Council polls. In the midst of all of this, there were also attempts to prop up political outfits other than the ones that were already in play in Jammu and Kashmir, like Altaf Bukhari's Apni Party. But these failed to gain traction or widespread legitimacy among the people. In the District Development Council polls, in fact, the Gupkar Alliance gave up its reluctance to contest elections till its demands were met and fought as an alliance across Jammu and Kashmir. It did quite well, and the reasons people say that the Gupkar Alliance gave up its reluctance to contest polls was also because the realization had dawned that by keeping away from the political process, from the ground, from the electoral process, these parties may be inadvertently giving an ingress to the BJP into the valley. Amidst all of this, we come to the point where the union government has now extended an invitation for political talks. The question that we need to ask at this time is, what exactly can we realistically expect to be on the plate during these talks? For the government, there is the realization that they need to engage with the mainstream political parties of Jammu and Kashmir, that its own attempts to prop up certain political parties as an alternative, or to prop up district and block development council level leaders to provide another set of mainstream leadership in the valley, has come a cropper or has not worked out quite in the manner in which it wanted, and therefore it needs to have a dialogue with the political parties that are at play in Jammu and Kashmir currently. For the mainstream political parties of Jammu and Kashmir, there is a realization that Delhi has to be dealt with, and that the political limbo currently existing in Jammu and Kashmir is not helping anybody, especially since political parties across the country have not been very loud in their condemnation of the reading down of Article 370. Again, there was another development which makes these talks extremely interesting, which is that the three-member Delimitation Commission set up for delineating assembly and parliamentary constituencies sent off letters to the 20 district commissioners of Jammu and Kashmir asking for topographical and demographic details of the areas under them, the surest sign that the process has kicked off and that we might yet see the delineation of assembly constituencies within the calendar year and subsequent assembly elections. Like last week, this week too, I expect that this story will be grabbing the headlines, and I'll be back with a follow-up. Do keep watching.